Welcome to the Iron Centurion Podcast, a Christ-centered adventure into leadership, manliness, and brotherhood. Today, I want to talk about some of our favorite things. And in fact, Tim, you suggested that we have this conversation and talk about stuff that we find cool and neat, right?
Yeah, we both enjoy like when some of our favorite YouTube channels or podcasts break down kind of what their favorite things of the previous year were. So I thought that'd be a fun segment for us to cover. And Michael, I'm always interested to see the toys that you bring around. We mentioned in our previous episode that our board meeting was not too long ago, and you brought some of your cool toys, and I think we'll be talking about some of those on this episode, right?
Sure will. Yeah, because those are neat. So I think here's the idea. You suggested 4 categories for 2021, four categories of things we thought were really cool, and so we've got the coolest tool that we each personally chose for the year. We've got the coolest toy, as you were just referencing, some of the stuff we used at the board meeting, for example. We've got the favorite book of the year for 2021, and I got to say that was brutal trying to narrow down to the favorite book. So I have 2, and then a favorite place, right?
Yeah.
So favorite place being place of travel, like place to go to outside of your normal stomping grounds, right?
I mean, I suppose if you just found a new closet in your house and you're really stoked about it, it could be that. But yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of travel, where you went.
Okay, good, because that's what I put in, which is interesting when we get there. So, I think we probably should say this now because it's not going to feel that way. I think none of these products or places or books asked us to mention these things. These are our opinions on what we think is really cool. So there are not many commercials here. This is just stuff that we actually really liked, used last year or got last year and said, this is neat. I think the men who listen to the podcast might like this stuff too. And so maybe if they're thinking about birthday presents or stuff for friends or for themselves, this might be something to put on their list.
I mean, all that to say, though, if you happen to be an employee of Sig Sauer and decide that you would like to support the ministry by what we're doing, I mean, feel free to contact us. We'd love to have you as a sponsor. I'll just throw that out there.
Got it. Okay, so what category do you want us to start with? Do you want to go through like mine and then yours, or do you want to go through like all your list of things, my list? How do you want to talk about this?
Let's do categories, and then we'll each talk about our favorites in that category. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. What categories first?
Tool, since I'm the tool man.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
All right.
Tim, what is your favorite tool from 2021?
So this came in at the very, very tail end of 2021. I was gifted a Starrett automatic center punch for Christmas.
I don't know what that means. So let me see if I can back. Okay. So punch, I'm thinking about like leather working tools or something that puts a center hole in something because it says center. Automatic, I have no idea, like laser guided or automatic, like as you just put it in like an automatic stapler. Is that what that means?
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
I'm now running out. I know the name Starrett, but I'm done.
What do you know the name Starrett for?
I don't know. That's what I was trying to remember.
So Starrett is traditionally known for their high quality measurement tools. So like calipers, micrometers, like precision instruments.
That's right. Okay.
In this case, however, so you're pretty close. A center punch is used for both woodworking and machining, metalworking type operations to put a mark where you will eventually be drilling into to keep your drill bit from wandering. Now, traditionally,
yes, of course.
Yeah. So traditionally you have a center punch, like it makes a mark, you hit it with a hammer and you're good to go. That can sometimes be a little bit precarious, right? Because you're trying to balance a part, you're trying to hold the actual striking object, and then you're trying to get the hammer, which is inevitably on the other side of the garage, to then whack the thing and get your mark.
Sure.
So this combines all these things into one and you push down and it has magic inside of it that whether you're working with metal or wood will make a dent or dimple in that material just based on the springs on the inside. It's really cool.
Okay, so I'm imagining something that looks kind of like a pen, but it's got the punch tip, a hardened metal tip.
Yep.
And that you're saying you place it where you want it, and then you press downward, and at some point it fires or triggers or does something and impacts the material deeper.
Yep. And if you want to get an even deeper hole, you just kind of do that a bunch of times in the same spot, and you have a nice, really, especially in metal, a really good place to get a drill bit started without it walking on you.
Sure, that makes sense. I've done some metal work, and I can see how that could be really helpful. That's cool.
So I got it at Christmas time, and at Christmas time, I got to spend a decent amount of time in the garage after that. And I have probably used this thing. Not probably. I've used this thing on every single project I've worked on since then, both with wood and metal.
Okay. Do you find it to be, you mentioned that it's helpful because of multiple hands not being needed. You don't have to balance stuff and chisel and hammer. Do you find that to be helpful? Do you find it to be a time-saving tool? What accuracy tool? What's the biggest benefit?
All of the above.
Okay. So,
yeah.
So good at all of them.
And it really helps. I mean, because I like, the more I work on these types of things, the more precise I like to be. I mean, you've worked with me in the garage before. You know my tendencies that why use a carpenter's pencil when you can use a mechanical pencil with a super fine tip on it, right? Like those types of things annoy you, and you roll your eyes and we move along. But the center punch really helps you make sure that, you know, where you actually start drilling is where you intended to drill. So
that sounds pretty cool. I'm going to have to add that to my shop collection. Okay, so speaking of shop ideas, favorite tools, here is my favorite shop tool addition from 2021. It is a pencil. It is a marking tool. It is a Hultafors mechanical pencil, but it's not a mechanical pencil like you're thinking. Like it doesn't have the fine detail level mechanical pencil. It is a big fat mechanical pencil with a lead in it that's I don't know, more than a millimeter, probably 2. I don't know. It's very thick. So it's like a big
using metric system.
Yeah. So it's like, one of those construction style job site pencils, like the big yellow kind of octagonal ones that are flattened, and you sharpen those. And that's what I always had. My dad had using growing up. But a friend told me about these and actually gave me one this year. And it's really cool because it's large mechanical. It has a holster that is hard-sided, so you're never breaking the tip, and the holster like hooks to your tool belt. So it's always, or your pocket or wherever you want it. So the pencil is always, it locks into this holster really well. The edge of the holster has a port for sharpening the pencil so that you can keep it sharp. And this thing is I just really like it.
I like that it's clickable and you can extend the tip just by using your thumb. That's handy.
Yes, it's
and it looks like it's got a long enough nose to it that you can stick it down in some small holes and trace the inside of holes or something like that.
That's right. Yes, and so it's narrow intentionally, but at the grip part in your hand, it's got a wide, nice grip. But then it narrows down so you can reach. And I've reached into small things to trace a hole for hanging a shelf, or putting a hole right through something where I need it very specifically for the screw to go in. I've been able to do that and reach down inside stuff. And so this has been, not a terribly, I mean, it's more expensive than a pencil you're going to get just off the shelf somewhere, but it's been worth it in my opinion. And it's one of the first things I grab when I'm starting a big project. I grab this and put it in my pocket for the Saturday's activities so I can have it with me. And a big fan.
So this is a good time to bring up the fact that we actually have a YouTube channel as well. And if you want to actually see the things that Michael's holding up on the screen, you can actually find us on YouTube and watch the podcast on YouTube. Right.
That's how you knew that it has a narrow tip, right? It's because you can see it. I've got this on camera. We're probably not holding up everything from this episode, but occasionally we do. And so
you didn't tell me it was going to be show and tell, so I didn't bring any of my stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. I think this is the only show and tell I brought, actually. Mostly just because I thought you'd really like it and you would want to see it.
Maybe you don't want to watch this one on YouTube because not much benefit to it. Poor time to bring up that ad.
But for those who don't know, we're on YouTube.
All right, moving on to toys. Now, as we get older, our toys get bigger and more expensive and
it's
such.
True.
Yours
more
tend to get more heavy, take up much more space in the garage. I mean, mine take up more space in the garage too. So why don't we talk about your favorite toy for the year?
All right. So this is one of the places where I have two, and I want to talk about both of them. So I've got two favorite toys for the year. The first one is actually what I brought to the board meeting, and it's actually a combination of toys, but it kind of goes together as a set. So it's firearm related. It is a MantisX. It is a little device that connects to any Picatinny rail on any firearm that has a Picatinny space. And it has an accelerometer in there, and it connects via Bluetooth to your smartphone. And then what it does is it reads back a tremendous amount of information during dry fire practice or live fire about how you handle the firearm, and it can improve or help and give you advice. It's like a coach, but it's a coach that is extremely detailed because it is able to, through some algorithms they have, figure out various small movements in either a pistol or a firearm, or it works on a shotgun or a bow and arrow, what those small movements are caused by, whether it's caused by poor grip in one hand or poor grip in your support hand, or if it's caused by bad trigger pull or bad trigger positioning on your finger, or a whole bunch of stuff. It can interpret that and give you specific coaching to improve your shooting. In theory, that's how it works. And we got to play around with it at the board meeting, as you mentioned.
So if you've been living under a rock and haven't noticed that ammo prices are just ridiculous right now. So Michael, you coupled this with some other toys, and the other toy was a dry fire mag, right? Is that the name of it?
That is. There's several different companies that make things kind of like this, but the one that worked for me in this application is a company called Dry Fire Mag. They make magazines that reset the hammer or striker inside your weapon. So it replaces. It's like a magazine, goes in this case, goes right in there, and it rests against the striker. So every time you pull the trigger, it resets the striker for you so that you can pull it again. And this is a big deal for training because some people use dry fire as training. Speaking of, quick disclaimer, you may have heard that dry fire is really bad for your firearm. That is a myth. That is not true. Dry fire is a fantastic way to practice, and it is not terribly difficult on your firearm. It's only using it the way.
In the military, they told us that like our hammer would shatter in our M4s, like if we dry fired them, and it's just like, no, that's not how that works.
I think there's a few exceptions based. So my understanding is that rim fire rifles, not center fire, but rim fire, have a hard time with this.
So like 22s.
Yeah. Yep. And that may be where maybe that's where the rumor came from originally. Everybody starts with the 22 in Boy Scouts, et cetera, and they're told, hey, don't dry fire. And so, but for some guns, it's just not that big a deal. Yes, it does use the spring. So it is a spring actuation. So you are wearing out the use of your gun at some level, but it is much less of a violent experience than actually having a cartridge in there. So it's not nearly as wear intensive. So the idea is couple this with a dry fire mag. So now I can take a shot, get a computer reading right away. And instead of having to rack the slide again on a pistol, I'm able to continue staying in proper form and shooting position so I can do repetitive shots, which is fantastic. This is a huge step forward in dry fire practice, because if you have to rack the slide every time, you build a really, really bad habit, and you have to break. You can only get one shot at a time. This allows me to shoot and make minor adjustments and shoot again, all safely at home. Because
in your living room.
In my living room. Yes.
And one of the other great benefits of dry fire, might I add, is that it helps retrain your brain as to what happens when you pull that trigger. So if you're someone who struggles with being a little bit jumpy when that round goes off, dry fire practice, and especially at this volume, right, where you can continuously reset, and it's not something where you've got to rack your slide every time, can really help you kind of establish some better patterns in what your brain is expecting to happen when that trigger is pulled, and helps with muzzle flip significantly. So
yeah, it's reducing flinch, because I'm building a whole bunch of muscle memory that now when I have a live round in there, the only difference will be the recoil and the discharge of the round, but everything else will have felt familiar to me. And so that's the idea, right? Is you're building good muscle memory around those kind of things.
So I was super thrilled with the amount of data that put out, and was reliable too. So there were a few times where it didn't work, or you pulled the trigger and it didn't quite register it, but I would say that those were few and far between in our experience. So
It does have to be kind of calibrated to because at one point we actually switched it from my firearm to yours, and it wasn't working very well on yours. And it's simply because you have a slightly different firearm, different spring tensions, etc., and we hadn't calibrated it to your firearm, and we didn't mess with doing that. We just put it back on mine. So I would say that if you get it, it's something you need to make sure you get it set and calibrated, and then it should work pretty well. It's so far it has for me. And the cool thing about this system, there's other dry firing practicing systems. There's even like artificial firearms you can buy specifically for dry fire practice, but that's a whole different firearm with different springs and different triggers, etc. What I'm getting to do is use my actual firearm, my spring tension, my trigger reset. All of that's going to be the same because I'm using my platform, and I'm not switching over to a CO2 built system or something because it's my system.
Yep. Yeah, that's super helpful.
So Tim, I mentioned I have two. So that's my first one. Do you want to talk about yours now, or do you want to talk about my second one?
Yeah, because mine kind of flows into that. It's in a similar family of things. So I just this year picked up a SIG M18 and a Romeo 1 Pro, kind of a combo package. So the M18 is the new Marine Corps service pistol, and it's a compact version of what the Army got, the M17. So this has a 3.9-inch barrel, so it's considered a compact pistol, but it has a 17 and 20 round mag capacity right out of the box. So I really like it for kind of being a concealed carry pistol, and also one that works for kind of being in my nightstand. I call it my bedtime blaster. But one of the things I really like about this is my first actual SIG that I've owned. I've been a huge SIG fan for a long time, but finally bit the bullet and actually bought one. But I really like that this came with night sights, and that's the first gun that I've had that's actually had true night sights on it. Perfect right out of the box, just the right level of visibility. So as soon as I took it out of the box, I immediately took off that back plate and inserted the miniature open reflex red dot sight that's also made by SIG, and that allows me to have some optic capabilities on it. And that's the first time I've ever shot a gun with an optic on the back, or excuse me, a pistol with an optic on the back. And that was really cool.
Did you shoot with both eyes open now, or do you still close one out of habit?
No, I shoot with both open now.
Okay.
So yeah,
I've heard that reflex sights make it real easy to do that.
They do. The hardest thing about the reflex sight is just getting kind of used to it, because if you don't have a perfect sight picture, sometimes it can be hard to find that dot. But that's just a practice and training thing. So,
and the so the M18, that's the civilian version of that. I mean, you can, as a civilian, you can get the M18, but there's the non-military version, which is the P320 from SIG, right?
Correct. Yep.
And the differences are, it doesn't have night sights. It's not milled for the reflex sight that you have. It's not pre-milled for that.
Yep.
But it's the same. It's essentially the same platform. Which, one of the things that's really cool to me about that platform is the way they designed it and build it is very unique. The actual firearm, the serialized part of those weapons, is the trigger cluster group, which means that the slide, the lower, all of that, everything else except for the trigger group can be swapped, and it's all the same kind of sizings. So you could even change yours up a size. You could go up to a bigger barrel,
yeah.
Right? If you
so technically I could make mine an M18 with the trigger group assembly. Now, in actuality, they've priced it such that like you start buying some of those components by themselves, and it's way cheaper just to buy the gun outright. But in theory, yes, that's possible.
I just think that general direction is kind of a neat direction to see other firearms hopefully maybe follow in. I think that because it means you can buy a bunch of stuff, or if you don't like the size of the lower grip, you can buy an entire other frame and it ships right to your house, because it's not actually part
an
of the
FFL item. Yeah,
right. Yeah, that's cool. I got to see it, and we were you had it at the board meeting, and then we also another day that we went shooting. It looks really good. It looks really good.
Yeah. Did you get to shoot it when we were out at the ranch?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. I just think it's great. Good recoil management with it, and I really enjoy it.
Cool. Yeah, that's very neat. And then those reflex sights, that little, I've always thought those might be a little bit fragile because it looks like a piece of glass window sticking way up high without anything to protect it. But man, the construction on yours looks really solid and not nearly as fragile as I assumed that it would be.
Yeah, it's got a solid aluminum housing that goes all the way around it. And the really nice thing about it is it's a motion activated optic. So that means if it's sitting there in the drawer, it's not going to turn on. But as soon as I pick it up, it's automatically on. So it's not something I've got to mess with the buttons on it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yep.
That's handy. That's nice.
All right. So number 3 for you.
Yes. Well, number 2.
Yeah, number 2 for you.
Second toy. Yeah, second toy idea. So a year ago, I purchased and learned how to use and got licensed to ride a motorcycle. And that's pretty exciting for me. And it really was a fun thing this year. The reason is my dad, he rides motorcycles and has since I was a kid. And so that's something he loves to do. And so I got a motorcycle, learned how to ride it, got the license with the intent of being able to spend some time this year or last year riding and spending some time with him doing something he enjoys doing. And that was the original plan and intent. And I thought I might enjoy it some, but it really wasn't something I was seeking all by itself. Like it was just something to spend quality time with my dad about. Turns out though, I was surprised by how much I actually enjoy it. And so I have enjoyed working on it because I got a really inexpensive one that is very much used so that if I dropped it, etc., I wouldn't feel bad about it yet because I was learning how to ride. But I have spent a bunch of time working on it. And so it has replaced even some of the time I spent working on my Jeep or taken away some time. Yeah, it's stolen some Jeep time. It's still wrench therapy though, but it's stolen a little bit of Jeep time. And I really, once I got the hang of it, I really, really enjoy the experience quite a lot.
So I still haven't seen this. What did you end up getting?
That's true. Actually, one of my first plans was to ride it to like come visit you and bring it. But here's the thing. I don't want to ride it on the roads that are between you and me. I try to stay away from the large traffic and highways. And
there's something about every time you try to come to Fort Worth, it's just traffic nightmares and something really bad happens on 183. So that is true. I believe that curse has been broken recently, but I think every single Iron Centurion event that we did for 3 or 4 years that were to the west of me, I literally came to all lanes stopped, something debris, some truck flipped over in the road, severe traffic collision every single time. It was brutal. So anyway, I don't want to be part of that or stuck in that with motorcycle. So I got it's a Suzuki Marauder, which was not very commonly made. You might hear Suzuki and think of the fast crotch rocket style bikes. It's not one of those. It's more of a cruiser style bike. So in your mind, maybe think of kind of like a Harley might be, specifically the kind of older ones. So it kind of feels and looks a bit like that. It's let's pull up some pictures. It's a 1999, so it's really old, but I think either somebody messed with the odometer, possible, or it's been mostly sitting in a barn, which I think that's been the case. That it was a barn bike for quite a while, so it has really low miles. It's just been sitting. So I'm doing some project work on it. Yeah, did you find some photos? Yeah, it's a sharp looking bike. I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I fit on it. Okay. I took a class, right? I took a class to learn how to ride a motorcycle, and they have these like little bitty tiny, they're almost like little clown motorcycles for you to learn in the class that you get to borrow. That was brutal because as you know, I'm tall, not as tall as you, but
you and me do not really belong on small bikes.
No,
of any kind.
It was so bad. It was so bad. And there was this task we were supposed to do that required very tight turning, like doing figure eights in the parking lot in a very restricted area. And I just couldn't do it. And I was trying to tell the teacher, like, something's wrong. I don't know what's going on. And he's like, well, you're just not good at this. Keep practicing. I was like, no, I don't think that's the problem. And I figured out that the handlebars were hitting my knees. And so I started sitting on the seat behind the seat, like the passenger seat on that little bike, which looked super stupid. But as soon as I moved to sitting back on the passenger seat, instantly I could do the exercise a lot easier. So everybody in the class is like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing what I need to do to pass this thing. So the one I have now is bigger and I don't have to do that.
You don't have to sit on the back seat.
No. I felt like such a buffoon, and it was cold. It was raining, and the class was happening. It was like 45 degrees in the rain, and I'm sitting on the back seat of a little bitty motorcycle in a parking lot behind a mall trying to do figure eights. It was brutal.
Sounds memorable.
Yeah, I'll remember it for a long time. It wasn't fun.
So do you have plans to keep this bike for a while, or are you gonna swap it out for something else soon? What do you think? Yeah,
there's already a part of me that desires something bigger and faster, etc. It's pretty slow, but at the same time, everybody I talk to that has had motorcycles always says, keep your first bike. I wish I'd kept my first bike. And so I have a chance right now to listen to their wisdom. And so I might do that. I didn't have to pay a lot of money for it. It'll just take up some space in my garage. But if I ever get another motorcycle, I might try to keep this one too. We'll see. Yeah, and it's really neat too that you got this and you use your other cool toys to spend time with other people. So I really appreciate that about you, and using your toys and your physical gifts to spend time with other people. It's really neat. Thanks, Tim. Tim, I'm afraid of this section. I'm dreading it a little bit. Well, yeah, that would make sense for a man who read, what, 54? Was that your total count for 2021? It was, and you're wanting me to pick the best one. The best one. And that's not like, this is hard. This is really hard because they're on a whole bunch of different categories, right? So if you ask me, what's the best one that you read about spiritual development or growth as a Christian? I've got one of those. If you said, well, what's the best one that you read that was like historical in nature or biographical? I've got one of those. And then if you said, well, what's the best one you read that was fiction? I've got one of those. But that's not the question you're asking. The question you asked is, what was the best book that you read in 2021? Yeah, see, most people wouldn't have like 97 categories to place their books in, but you're kind of a freak of nature, and I don't know if I'd really call that reading at that point. That's like Matrix level, like you downloaded that many books onto your brain hard drive. It kind of is. And so to be fair, when I then come across a book that is very good, that is life-changing and impactful, what I do often is I will listen to the whole thing again, or I will actually buy a physical copy and slowly work through reading it, like an actual book. Sure, like a book in a physical format. Yes. All right, so here we go. Then I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. I'm not going to give you the best book I read in 2021. I have to give you two. And so here are the two best books that I read in 2021. Okay, if this helps you sleep at night. It does. I just can't do it. So the first one is by C.S. Lewis. I try to read something by C.S. Lewis pretty regularly. In fact, I try to read Mere Christianity every year. I didn't last year. Instead, I read the Screwtape Letters, which was fantastic. You're familiar with the Screwtape Letters, aren't you? Have you read this one? Yeah. So it's a really weird book. In fact, C.S. Lewis said it was one of the most difficult things he's ever written from the perspective of what it did to him. It took him to a really difficult, dark place. But he said also it's one of the easiest books he's ever written. It just kind of flowed. He just drafted it and wrote it and was done. It was so immensely popular that he was asked over and over to write an additional one or like a follow-up to it, and he refused because of how dark a place it took him to, and so he never did. He ended up later writing a brief, I think it was published in like a newspaper. It was Screwtape Makes a Speech or something is the name of it. It was like one speech from this character Screwtape, and that's all he could ever do again. He couldn't do anything else. So for the people who haven't read it, what is generally this book about? Right, and that's why it's so dark. So the idea is that Screwtape is a demon, and he is writing to his nephew, who is coming along as a new tempter. And he's been assigned a patient, a human, who he is trying to tempt and keep away from the enemy, God. And so it's an exchange of letters between Screwtape and his nephew, Wormwood. but we only hear Screwtape's side. So Screwtape is sending letters, and we've gotten less collection of them, right? It's all made up and fictional, but it gives as C.S. Lewis only could, a deep understanding of human nature and of God and the way that we think. And so it's just Screwtape working with this young tempter in all areas of things that he would seek to destroy in this man's life. So relationships and church and work and purpose and all of the ways that it might be that could be undermined and not to be used for the enemy's purposes. The enemy, again, right, being God, because it's from the demon's perspective. Yeah. And so it's a fascinating look into mostly into human nature. Sure, there's a little bit of demonology in there, and it's certainly a fictional-ish writing, right? I mean, it's not as many of C.S. Lewis's writings could be. It's a lot of metaphor, but it's deeply instructive. I found it working on my soul in some of the ways that I think about things and do things, and it was good to read over that.
Yeah, we actually went through it. Well, so I read it for the first time in college, but then we went through it with one of my small groups a couple of years ago. It's kind of like read a couple chapters and then discuss kind of the biblical implications of things. And yeah, so that was a good discussion as well.
You know, I'd actually love to make a pitch for the Screwtape Letters being a book that we read on the podcast together in the future and then talk about it. I think it would be really cool to get your thoughts on it, because you and I've never talked about it in depth, but also bring everybody along. I know right now we're working on doing some other stuff, but in the future, I think it could be cool to do a book like that and do the Screwtape Letters. So we'll see.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
So what was number two?
Number two,
tied for first.
Tied for first. Briefly, it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer by Erich Metaxas. It's a very thick biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's life, and he was a.
Are you saying Hoofer intentionally?
Yes.
Because I've only ever heard it Bonhoeffer.
I can go back and say it that way if you want, but the audiobook that I listened to, the narrator said it that way the entire time, and other people I've heard have said it that way too.
This is really throwing me off. If you know, please write a comment about which pronunciation is correct, whether it is Bonhoeffer, as Michael pronounces, or Bonhoeffer, as the rest of the world has said it to me. So
yeah, well, but it's German, right? Don't you know a little bit of German? Which do you think it should be?
You're going to put me on the spot like that. I'm going to embarrass myself and just say I don't know. So back to what the book was actually about.
So this guy named Dietrich, he's German. He lives in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. And he's a pastor. He runs, he's a big time, like he runs seminaries. He trains other pastors. He's a very deep thinker. And he has a whole bunch of writings that are very influential to the church. And in fact, he may be one of the roughly modern era biggest thinkers doctrinally and theologically. So he's this significant giant in the theology world and kind of the mental space world. But on top of that, Germany, the 1930s and 40s, difficult
kind of rough place to be.
Rough place to be. And so he is part of one underground church because he's not willing to be part of the Hitler authorized church. And he's trying to lead some underground movements against that, which actually didn't start underground, but had to move underground as Hitler grew in power. And then he is part of plots to remove Hitler from power. And so there's a lot of questions that he struggled with and debated about war, pacifism, and removing people from power and how to do that. And should you do that as Christians and being subject to your governing authorities, all that stuff he's having to think through, but not just academically. He's having to think it through as he's living it. And he becomes a force to help also raise awareness in general about some of the things that Hitler was up to, because he could he detected evil there earlier than many, most. Yeah. And so it's a really fascinating story to read about his life, which ultimately ends tragically days before the end of World War II and the collapse of the Third Reich. Bonhoeffer is which I said Bonhoeffer there, but Bonhoeffer's executed by the Nazi state like a week before the war ends.
Yeah, he was in a prison camp, right?
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah.
and they execute him right at the very, very end. And it was almost certain that wasn't going to happen and he was going to be released. And then that's not what occurs. And so it's a heavy read of his life, but it was really fascinating because I'd read some of his stuff before. And so to read this deep biography that was very long, it's a lot of pages, or a lot of minutes, to read about his life in depth, things that I did not know, was inspiring. He's a hero of the faith, a modern one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm reading through Life Together right now, and that's the first book of his that I've read. So I'm enjoying it.
Life Together is fantastic. I have been through it twice. It is deep. It is thick stuff. And it took me a while to realize one of the reasons it's hard to read partially is because, well, one, he was really intelligent. And two, he wrote it in German, right? And so the version you're reading has been translated, and German translated to English can get thick and heavy.
So just learn some more German, and I'll just switch to the German copy of it.
There you go.
Life goals.
All right. So what about you? Did you have a favorite book? Was this hard for you to do this, or was this easy?
Well, since I only read like a mere 13 or 14 books last year instead of 54,
that is a
respectable. It was much
number.
easier to down select. Yeah.
Well, that's a very respectable number.
I read Gentle and Lowly, which was recommended to me by one of my pastors. And the subtitle is The Heart of Christ for Sinners and Sufferers. And I'm just going to read you the first sentence of the description that's listed on Amazon. And yeah, I'll just read that. It says, Christians can easily feel that Jesus is perpetually disappointed and frustrated, maybe even close to giving up on them. They know what Christ has done for them, but who is he? Does he feel, or how does he feel about his people amid their sins and failures? So I hadn't even gotten all the way through that statement, that question. And I was already clicking the buy button because I was like, yeah, this is something that kind of resonates with me on a deep level, this idea that, is difficult to shake, that Christ is disappointed with my struggles and my failures and things that come up over and over again. And this book really was a difficult one to work through, mainly because for the first half of it, I was fighting the sense that this is really for someone else, that Jesus, I wasn't wrestling with theology in it. I really felt like he had a strong sense of doctrine about what he was writing. I felt like biblically everything was well supported, but I just felt like it wasn't for me. See, I just struggle with it in the sense that this was good for other people, but probably not true for me. And the Lord really just did a number on my heart as I made my progress through the book. And yeah, it became one of my favorite books, or my favorite book of the year. One of
your favorite books?
Yeah.
It's gotta be the favorite book, Tim.
Okay. Well, I have a runner up as well. Okay. So yeah, if you have room on your reading list, it's been a bestseller the last year or two that it's been out.
Yeah, this has become extremely popular recently, right? Like,
yes.
It's everywhere
for good reason. I mean, it's a difficult book to read through, but it's very practical and very doctrinally sound. I would recommend it wholeheartedly to everybody to go out and take a copy of it.
Well, because of your recommendation, I actually bought a copy on paper, and my wife and I are reading it together slowly. So each morning we read a little bit through, kind of like devotional style, and it's broken up in a way where you could do that. The chapters are short-ish, but there's also like sub breaks, and so we're just working our way through it a few pages at a time. And the second time through for me, because I had read it just briefly previously to that, it's very, very good.
Yeah. And when I read it, the study guide was not available yet, but it looks like the study guide has been published. So if you're looking for some Bible study format to do this with some friends of yours, or, so I met with Colby, who we've had on the podcast, and we went through it together. But it'd be a great format to have the study guide to do that together with a buddy, or something like that, if you wanted to read through it.
Have you seen the journal? They came out with a journal for it too, and I didn't know if it's just like a cover with blank pages inside, or if there's like questions or prompted journaling.
I have not seen the journal, so perhaps if you have seen the journal, hit us up in the comments. Let us know what that's like, because I'd be interested in that as well.
Okay, what's your runner up? Because I love books, so more is better.
Runner up, and I'll be brief on this one, but it's called Slaying Leviathan, and it is a excellent book on the history of the church and state, kind of from, I would say, from the first century up until the 18th century, really when you start to have the founding of the United States, and is kind of where that book wraps up. But what it does, it kind of parallels church history, and it parallels Western civilization history from in that time period that I just talked about, and kind of the interweaving of the church and the state through that time period, and how the church influenced government and how government influenced the church, and how doctrine and theology have evolved in that time frame, and how thinkers of the time, so people like Francis of Assisi and Martin Luther and John Locke, how their mindsets were shaped by the church and by the government and by the understanding of scriptures at those times. And it's a really wonderful picture of how our Constitution, how our government was formed, why our government was formed, why we broke away from England at the time. So fascinating study of history, but also a lot of really great practical implications of what government should look like from a biblical perspective.
So Western civilization government from Rome to the American Revolution, essentially.
Yeah. And you're going to wish you'd paid more attention in Western Civ class, because you're going to see like a lot of names and places that didn't really make a whole lot of sense at the time because they were just dots on a timeline. But this guy weaves them together masterfully to talk about why they all mattered in the grand scheme of things. So.
Got it. So it's dates that you've remembered maybe, but you don't remember why you were supposed to remember them.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Okay, good. More books is better.
So, maybe you can shoot for 56 this year. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But that one might be on my list, but I can't find an audio version of it, so I don't know.
I actually have to do a thing called reading.
Might have to. Category 4.
Category 4 is place. Now, Michael, you and I are both a huge fan of travel.
Huge fan of travel.
To get up and see the world that God has created. Why don't you start this one off? Where was the favorite place that you visited in 2021?
Well, this is good because even though 2021 was a very limited travel year for me, in fact, one of the least amount of travel that I've done in a decade or more, perhaps, maybe longer, I still got to go to one of my absolute favorite places. So this was not hard. It's the only place I went, but it's still the favorite place I went. And it was a place that has always been, I don't even know how to describe this well in words. There are certain places, specifically places outdoors, that for me are cleansing and purifying to my soul, like walking into a sanctuary of worship, maybe for some. For me, there's just some places that just everything strips away and I see the awesomeness and grandeur of God very undistractedly there. And one of those places in the world is a place I've been trying to go to regularly, which is southwestern Colorado, the area surrounding Silverton, Colorado. Silverton is this little bitty town. It has a few hundred people that live there year round. They don't have all streets paved. In fact, I think they have one paved street. The rest are gravel because they get a ton of snow. It is like the 11th highest populated city in the US. It's at a very high elevation, 10,000
So as in
something.
Highest altitude, not 11th highest populated.
No, right. Altitude. It's very, very high. In fact, you know what? I need to know this. So I actually need to look it up. What is the actual elevation of Silverton? I know it's number 11 on the list when I looked at it. Let's see what it actually is. Silverton, Colorado. It's north of Durango. It's at 9,318 feet, which is about 1,000 feet higher than anything else nearby, maybe even more than that. And so it's really high up there, which means in the summer comes late and the summer doesn't get terribly hot during the day and it gets cool at night. And in the winter, they get a ton of snow, which is why not many people live there year round. But in the summer, a ton of tourists descend on the place. And I am kind of one of those. But it's surrounded by a lot of national forest, and you can camp and stay anywhere. And this is where I take my Jeep. And so my wife and I went up there this past summer. We've tried to go every year. It turns out to be not every year, every time, but we go there often and just spend some time. And this year it was especially meaningful for my soul. It was very hard getting there. There was a ton of roadblocks and stuff just didn't work. Our truck got broken into and damaged right before we were supposed to leave and had to get it fixed. And this broke and that broke. And just everything that could go wrong seemed to be going wrong. So we spent about half the time there we intended. And I was not sure that we should keep pushing through to get there, but I did. And as soon as we got there, it was very refreshing for my soul. And it was the right thing to do and the right place to be. I don't know if it'll have that same mystical magic for others. I can't promise that, but I love this little quaint town. It's very still, doesn't know what it's going to be. It's got a lot of, there's a train that runs through the mountains that stops there, an old steam engine that runs between Durango and Silverton. It's a cool tourist event, but it feels like
I got to ride that when I was like 5. It's really cool. I remember it.
It's a great little place, cool train, cool town. The town doesn't fully know, how to grow. All the ones around it are doing touristy things and growing very rapidly in tourism. And it doesn't want to do that or doesn't know how, which is great for me because I don't want to go to a touristy trap place in the summer. And it still kind of is some, but it's not doing what a lot of places are doing. And I like that about it. It's this one town. It's the only town in the entire county. The entire county is just there, kind of the top of this little cluster of mountains. So it's the county seat because it's the only city in the county. So it's just a cool, quaint place.
Where do you stay when you go there?
So often we've stayed in tents because it's surrounded by national parks. Like 2 miles out of town, you're in a national forest and you can just camp anywhere. This last time we took a small, little RV thing that I pulled behind the truck with a Jeep on the trailer too. And so we had an RV little campground space that we stayed at. And then I take my Jeep and I go up into the mountains from there, and I can spend all day driving on. They're technically like fire access roads, but they feel very much like poorly maintained gravel roads or worse. And the view is just beautiful. And so it's like backpacking way up into the mountains, but you can do it in a day without all of the physical exertion of hiking way up into the mountains that you couldn't do actually in one day. In fact, I took one of my day excursions. I went up to the headwaters of the Rio Grande River, where the Rio Grande starts and comes down and becomes the border of Texas, starts right there outside of Silverton.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite places in the whole world.
Well, just a few miles down the road is another town. And I'll preface this by saying 2020 was the year that Angela and I had our 10th anniversary. We had been planning for the 5 years prior to that, a massive excursion that we were going to take in Europe. Anyway, all that to say, we didn't end up getting to Europe in 2020. And I really wanted to end our trip to Europe in Switzerland, which is my pretty much all-time favorite place on the planet right now. So one of Angela's favorite places is Ouray, Colorado, and their little byline is the Switzerland of America.
That's why I'm laughing, because I clicked it together. Like, that's their little byline. You're right. That's a little motto. Yeah.
And having been to Switzerland and now having been to Ouray, I can totally see it. So Angela and I celebrated a big milestone in her life. I surprised her with the trip, and we ended up going with a couple of friends of ours up to Ouray, and we spent a week up there without kids. It was a lot of fun. But we did the rim trail all around the city. We got to soak in the hot springs when it was like 50 degrees outside. And it was really cool. So yeah, we had a great trip up there. It snowed on us, and this was in May. So we got to experience all the seasons, but just a neat little town. We got to walk up and down the main street. We got to stay at a little Airbnb, go to the grocery store that, is built to service, a really tiny town. It was just kind of a neat break from the hustle and bustle of living in a city like Fort Worth. So
yeah, And it is. I have been there, and actually, I was not far, as you mentioned. Silverton is like the next town over, kind of down. Just like Uray is just down the mountain from where I was. We were there at different times, but it's, I don't know, 15, 20 miles away, maybe less, down the $1 million highway, 550.
Yep.
Which is a beautiful drive. You don't even have to go off road to really enjoy the mountains there. So you can just drive 550 and it's beautiful. But if you're squeamish about mountain roads, it's probably not a great one to choose.
We got a decent way out of Uray on $1 Million Highway before the snow started to really take over. And we were in a rental that was not built for snow activities. So we're like, we're just going to go ahead and turn around here while we still can.
That was the right call for sure. That road there's a lot of places where it's literally just a 2-lane highway with no shoulder. Like the yellow line is painted right on the edge of the highway. And then the other side of the yellow line is a drop off. Yeah. And then in fact, there's a couple places where they couldn't widen it enough. And so there's a corner. Did you get to this corner? There's a corner where you can't really see around the corner very well. And the 2-lane narrows to 1 lane. And so you have to take turns, but you can't see around the corner. And so it's this really tight little spot.
No, I don't even think we made it that far because the snow was pretty heavy. So
it's a beautiful drive. It's beautiful. I don't know why they call it $1 Million Highway. Some said it's because the views are worth $1 million. Some say because it cost $1 million to build per mile when it was built a long time ago.
That's the description I'd heard.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
The views are worth $1 million though. It's one of the most beautiful drives in the country. It's on the top of the list of beautiful scenic drives. It's very pretty.
So I will say I have a runner-up for this category as well. So as you know, Michael, I used to travel quite extensively for work. Yes. A lot of those were international trips. But this year, or in 2021, I did actually get to go on one international trip. And to be honest, I wasn't super excited about it.
No, I remember you told me you weren't looking forward to it.
Because it was going to be a super long trip. It was almost 3 weeks. And my coworkers had kind of prepped me like, hey, we went to this country a few years ago and they called it the Aldi of Scandinavia, which in their approximation meant that it wasn't quite as nice as the other grocery stores that are its cousins of Norway and Sweden.
So that sounds like a ringing endorsement. Why wouldn't you want to go there?
Right. So I went to Finland, and specifically I spent about 3 weeks in the city of Helsinki. And it's probably, of no shock at this point that it's on my favorites list for the year. It ended up being a fantastic trip, and I loved Helsinki tremendously. Probably one of my favorite cities in Europe that I've been to so far.
What's its general vibe or theme that what makes it special?
So I will say this: I was there in the summer. Helsinki is very far north, and I don't remember exactly what the comparable latitude was in the continental United or in the North American continent, for example. But it's pretty far north. They don't get a whole lot of sunshine in the non-summer months. In the summer months, however, I think the sun was coming up somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was getting dark around 11 p.m. So very few hours of actual nighttime. In fact, when we came back from the trip, we're like, do you guys ever remember walking around at night? And we did a couple of times, but it was very rare, even as late as we would stay out after we were done working. So beautiful place. We were right on one of the inner harbor areas. So there was a lot of activity, a lot of places you could walk to, a lot of great food. Everyone was so friendly, and everyone spoke fantastic English. So it made it really easy to communicate. And I'm not usually, the typical like ugly American that expects you to cater to my lack of understanding of your culture and language. I usually do my part to like learn what I can prior to going. But in Finland, their English was so perfect. I mean, it was almost laughable if I tried to speak in Finnish, which is not easy in the slightest.
I have heard it is a difficult language.
Yeah.
But
so great food.
Does it sound really beautiful? The language isn't it? I don't know. I haven't heard Finnish, but isn't it that one of those languages that's very sing-songish, beautiful sounding? Is that true?
I would say sing-songish. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Okay.
But I got to experience some really neat things out there. We went to with my friends and I that were out there working. We got to go to one of the UNESCO World Heritage sites. We got to see the largest sea fortress in the world, which was super cool. I think we actually posted some photos to our Instagram while I was out there from there.
We did. We played one of the where in the world is Iron Centurion, because I think you took a picture of your hat somewhere and people try to figure out where it is. We do that occasionally on our Facebook and Instagram. We'll post something and got to figure out where it is.
Yeah.
In fact, I think Ouray, Colorado was an answer this past year. Maybe I took some photos. I don't know if I posted any from the Rio Grande headwaters, but I meant to. So bummer if I didn't. Now it's ruined. Oh, well. But yeah, we do that from time to time.
So that almost brings me up to a question I want to ask you, Michael, is when you go to a new place, what are some of your tips and tricks for where you want to go explore? How do you find out what your itinerary is going to be? You know, how do you kind of do your advanced recon when you plan a trip?
That's a great question. Let me answer that. And also I'll say in the background, I was just looking up how the latitude of Helsinki, Finland, the US city that it compares to is Anchorage, Alaska.
So it's up there.
It's up there. Yeah. Okay. I like doing a lot of research ahead of time. I don't necessarily hold myself to a really super strict schedule of events, but what I don't want to do is waste time on the ground going, what do I want to do? And so I like to have a list, even a list that I know I can't get through, so that I just have options. And so I have found the TripAdvisor app to be a pretty good one. It can be somewhat commercialized, but the forums on TripAdvisor can be really helpful for, hey, I think I might want to go see this. What does the TripAdvisor forums say about it? And you can find locals or tourists who have said, I thought this was going to be cool and it wasn't, and here's why. And you can listen to it and go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to do that. Or you can read it and go, well, actually, that sounds really cool to me. I definitely want to make sure I see that. And then on TripAdvisor, you can download an itinerary of all the things you want, the places you want to go, and save them offline. So when you're overseas somewhere that you don't have internet access, you can still pull up your list and it'll still work with GPS to navigate you from where you are to that spot, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's handy.
Yeah. It doesn't like show you the road maps and stuff all the ways, or not perfectly. You can download those ahead of time, but it's not going to be updated with all of the, the traffic data and stuff like that. But it'll still like help you walk around the city and get from one spot to the next. So that's pretty cool. So I like to do that. The other thing that I like to do is leave in white space buffer time, just to be able to sit down at like a coffee shop or a library, like a bookstore or something, and just experience the place and the culture, and not be racing from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and just barely catching trains and catching the next, shuttle to here. Like I want to be able to spend some time to kind of see not just the surface tourist level of something. So I like to do those things. What about you?
So I have a similar approach. TripAdvisor is usually like my first go-to in terms of like, I'll look at the rankings on what are the best things to do in the area. But then I've also started looking at you're going to make fun of me for saying this, but some like travel vlogs.
You mean like the channels where people just like walk around and tell you what they're seeing? Yeah,
the ones where like you get the Instagram influencer wannabes that are taking drone videos and selfie videos of all the cool things we're seeing, because normally they highlight some of the cool things in the city that you'd want to see potentially. I add those to my list.
I'm actually I'm not going to make that much fun of you, because when I can't get to Colorado and drive Jeep trails, sometimes I'll pull up YouTube videos where people have just put a camera on their dash and it's hours of them driving the trails. So sometimes I'll let those run in the background. So I feel like that's worse.
That's similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're safe.
And then the third option, and I'm the same way as you. I don't like to overplan a trip. I like to have some key moments in the trip that I was like, we definitely want to do X, Y, or Z, but then leave kind of some freedom and space to make different plans as the day goes along. And one of the things that help fill in those gaps, I'll talk to, whether it be an Uber driver or somebody at a restaurant, kind of get them for the locals flavor of, hey, what should I be doing? I have this much time. What would you recommend for your city or your town that you live in? So usually get a lot of really good recommendations, especially for places to eat. If you're trying to experience some local cuisine, asking the locals where to go is always a good tip. So
that is actually a really good idea. And as you were saying it, it reminded me that some of the best things I've seen in some of my travels have been the unexpected ones. The things that I left margin for, and they just happened because I met somebody and they said, oh, you got to come do this, or come do this with us, or something was closed or advertised, or there was a sign, or somebody handed me a flyer, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll go do this. And I wouldn't have been able to do it if I hadn't left space in my schedule. And I think the number one, especially I've talked to people going to Europe for the first time, and they say, hey, what should we do? And I will say, make your list and then cut it in half. Yep. Like, no, I want more things for my list. I'm like, no, you want less things on your list.
Yep,
because
I agree.
The things that I'm most favorite of generally seeing are the one or two really big things. Like if I'm going to Paris, like I want to see the Louvre and I want to see the Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower. That's the three things. Everything else that I'll see will end up maybe being a even better memory, or at least as good of a memory. And I wouldn't have had time to do it if I didn't leave margin.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
Plus, if you don't leave margin, you just feel stressed the entire time of, oh, we've got a time schedule to meet. And
yes.
Not a good way to experience a trip.
The other thing I like to do on a trip, though, is I don't want to spend very much of it sleeping if I can avoid it, especially sleeping from jet lag. So I am curious, do you have any like jet lag avoiding tips? How do you maximize time on ground?
I do, but it's going to sound super pretentious just because usually when I travel overseas, like I'm going with work and work pays for business class. So I would say fly in business class and sleep as much as you can on the plane beforehand, and then just get up. And the big tip though is that seriously, whether you fly coach or any other class of airfare, when you get to your destination, you have to immediately jump onto their time schedule. So don't take a nap. Don't do anything that sounds like that might be a good idea. Just meet or blend in with the local time schedule.
Okay. I like that tip. In fact, I think I'm going to take maybe one further step. I started doing this a while back. I will 2 or 3 days before I depart, set my watch to destination time. And I won't try to cold turkey switch that far in advance, but I will start to try to move my sleep schedule so it closer matches. So for example, if it's, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it's maybe time to get ready for bed, but I look at my watch and I go, hey, it's 6 a.m. where I'm headed. They're just waking up. I might not go to bed at 10. I might try to go to bed at 11:30. Just so I'm slowly starting to shift my sleep schedule to match more and more. If I can. I can't always do that, but I've found that to really, really help. So I'm spreading out jet lag by pre-jet lagging.
Yeah, I don't know if that would help me or not. Like I'll wake up for the first week, usually then I'm overseas somewhere at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and just be like, all right, my body's up. We're ready to go. It's just like, nope, you're not.
Yeah. And it's all different, whether you fly east or west and which way you get the jet lag. But I know that I don't want to spend time in the place I'm going to be sleeping. I can sleep here. I want to be there and awake, especially if the sun's up. Yep.
Well, travel to Finland. You'll have plenty of sunshine in the summertime.
Plenty of sunshine. It sure sounds like it. Well, hey, I've liked talking about favorite things. This was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was neat.
Yeah. Hey, tell us about your favorite things. So if you're listening along, send us an email, podcast@ironcenturion.org, comment on our Facebook page or Instagram, or et cetera. Tell us 2021, what kind of things did you introduce to your life that were favorite things? You don't have to stick to our 4 categories if you don't want to. So it can be something new, something different. What are highlights for 2021 that you're going to remember for a long time, that you're glad you got, that maybe other people should know about too? And we can share those ideas with others, and we'll pick up something from you that we would like to have on our list. That'd be great.
Well, gents, thanks for joining us on the Irons and Turn podcast, a Christ-centered adventure into leadership, manliness, and brotherhood. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Iron Centurion podcast. We're thankful for the support of listeners like you who support this podcast through donations. If you'd like to be a part of our support team, please visit ironcenturion.org/donate. For more information on what it means to be a leader for Christ or how you can get involved, check out ironcenturion.org.